The evening at the Grand Hill Hotel started like most evenings did for the staff. Soft music floated through the hall. The warm glow of golden lights made everything look gentle, and the tables were set perfectly with polished glasses and folded napkins. Guests in elegant clothes walked in one by one, their perfumes mixing with the smell of fresh flowers placed at every corner of the room. Among the staff moving quietly around the hall was a young waitress named Lena. She had started her shift an hour earlier and was already on her feet, carrying trays and refilling water glasses without drawing attention to herself. She always worked this way, calm, quiet, and focused. She liked blending into the background. The less she was noticed, the easier the night felt. Tonight was special for the hotel. A charity dinner was being held, and many well-known business leaders, actors, and wealthy guests had been invited. The hotel had prepared for weeks, and the staff had been reminded again and again that the guests tonight were important, which meant there was no room for mistakes. Lena knew this, so she kept her eyes down and moved carefully between tables, doing her job without speaking unless spoken to. But even with all the pressure, there was something comforting about the music coming from the speakers. It was soft. Piano music, the kind that sounded like water flowing gently over stones. It helped her relax a little as she worked. Sometimes without thinking she would hum quietly along with the melody. She never did it loudly, just a gentle sound under her breath to help her keep a steady pace. She didn't realize that anyone would notice, but someone did. About an hour into the event, a group of wealthy guests entered the hall. They walked in with confidence, speaking loudly and laughing in the way people do when they want the whole room to know they've arrived. At the center of the group was a well-known millionaire. He had a reputation for being bold and unpredictable. People either loved him or felt nervous around him. He liked to challenge others, even when he didn't mean any harm by it. It was simply part of his personality. As he took his seat with his friends near the front of the hall, Lena came by to pour water into the glasses at their table. She was humming softly again, lost in her own little rhythm, not thinking about the guests around her. She placed a glass down and turned to walk away when she heard a voice behind her. "Hey, hold on," the millionaire said. His voice was loud enough to make a few nearby guests turn their heads. Lena froze for a moment, then turned around slowly. She wasn't sure if she had done something wrong. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You were humming just now, right?" She nodded politely. "Sorry, sir. I didn't mean to disturb anyone." "Disturb?" he said with a laugh. No, I'm curious. You were humming to the music coming from the speakers, weren't you?" She nodded again, unsure where he was going with the question. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated for a second, then said, "Lena." "Well, Lena," he said, tapping his fingers on the table as if an idea had struck him. "Do you know how to play the piano?" The question surprised her, and for a moment she didn't know how to answer. "A little," she said quietly. "But I haven't played in years." His smile widened. "A little, huh? Interesting." His friends leaned in. Curious about what? He was thinking. Two of them exchanged looks, waiting for him to continue. When the millionaire got this type of spark in his eyes, everyone knew something unexpected was about to happen. "You see that piano up front?" he asked, pointing toward the large grand piano near the stage area. Lena looked at it. She'd walked past it many times during her shift, but she never imagined she'd be asked about it. "Yes," she said softly. "Why don't you go play something for us?" He asked. At first, Lena thought he was joking. She let out a small, nervous laugh. "I'm just working, sir." "I don't think that's allowed." He waved his hand. "Come on. Just one piece." His friends started chuckling, and a few guests at the nearby tables looked over with interest. Lena's heart began to beat faster. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. Her manager happened to be on the other side of the room, arranging chairs for a small presentation that would happen later. She knew he wouldn't like her stepping out of her role. At this job, every staff member had to stick to their duties. There were rules, clear rules, and playing the piano was definitely not part of her shift. She tried to gently step away. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't. I have to keep working." The millionaire leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I'll tell you what," he said in a confident voice. "If you go up there and play just one song, I'll double my donation tonight. Every year, I donate a large amount to this event. This time, I'll make it twice as big. All you have to do is play something for a minute or two." His friends raised their eyebrows. One of them said, "Come on, that's a good offer." Another laughed. "Yes, play something. Let's hear it." More guests turned to look. The whispers began, soft but noticeable. Lena felt a tightness forming in her chest. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. She didn't enjoy standing in front of people. She always preferred being in the background, doing her work quietly. Standing there while the whole table stared at her made her feel suddenly small. She looked down at her hands, her fingers shaking slightly. "I really can't," she said, though the words felt weak even to her own ears. The millionaire shook his head, but he wasn't angry. In fact, he seemed more amused than anything. "Oh, come on, don't be shy," he said. "Look, no one here is expecting a professional performance. Just have fun with it. It's for charity." He spoke loudly enough that people nearby could hear him. Now, a few guests at another table had turned around completely, watching the conversation with interest. One older woman whispered to her husband, "Is he really asking the waitress to play?" The husband shrugged. "It's him. He loves doing things like this." Lena felt her face grow warm. She didn't want attention. She didn't want to be laughed at or judged. But she also knew what doubling the donation could mean. The charity event was raising money for children's education programs. The donations tonight would help many families. The thought of helping those children tugged at her heart, but still playing in front of a room full of wealthy strangers wasn't simple for her. She hadn't touched a piano in years. Not since the last time she had tried to keep her dreams alive. That part of her life felt far away now, like it belonged to a different version of herself. When she didn't reply, the millionaire said, "Tell you what, if your manager says yes, and you have no reason to say no, go ask him." Lena swallowed hard. Her hands squeezed together. She didn't want to go ask. She knew her manager's face as clearly as if he were standing right next to her, serious, strict, always watching. But now all eyes were on her. Even people who weren't part of the original conversation had turned in their chairs, waiting to see what she would do. "Hi," she began, but her voice trailed off. The millionaire leaned back again. "Come on, it'll make the night more fun. And I promise you, I will keep my word about the donation." One of his friends chimed in, "Show us what you've got." Another added with a smirk, "If it sounds bad, we won't blame you." The last comment made a few people laugh softly. It wasn't meant to be cruel, but it still hit her somewhere deep inside, somewhere fragile. Lena took a small step back. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat now. She wanted to disappear, but she knew she couldn't walk away without looking rude. She tried to breathe slowly to calm herself. Finally, she nodded. "I'll ask him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's the spirit," the millionaire said with a grin. Lena turned and walked quickly toward her manager before she lost the courage. Every step felt heavy. She rehearsed the words in her mind, though she didn't know how he would react. She reached him just as he finished adjusting a row of chairs. "Excuse me," she said softly. He looked up immediately, noticing the tension in her voice. "Everything okay?" She hesitated. "One of the guests asked me to play the piano." He blinked. "What?" She explained the situation briefly. He looked past her shoulder toward the millionaire's table. He clearly recognized him. Everyone in the hotel did not. Her manager sighed, rubbing his forehead. "This is not part of your job, Lina." "I know," she said quickly. "I told him that. And yet you came here to ask permission." He folded his arms. She nodded slowly. "He said he'd double his donation if I played." The manager paused for a long moment. The hotel had a strict reputation to maintain. But this event was also about raising money. And that particular guest was known for keeping his promises when he made them loudly. Finally, he said, "If you play one short piece and come straight back to work, I'll allow it. But keep it simple, nothing long. And no mistakes, please. The hotel's reputation matters tonight." Lina nodded. "I understand." He looked at her more gently. "Are you sure you want to do this?" She didn't know, but she nodded anyway. "All right," he said. "Go ahead." Her heart thudded. She turned back toward the tables, the weight of the moment sinking in. People were still watching. The millionaire raised his eyebrows when he saw her returning. "Well?" he asked. "My manager said it's okay," she said quietly. "Excellent," he said, clapping his hands once. "Go right ahead." Lina took a deep breath and slowly walked toward the piano at the front of the hall. The air around her felt heavy. She could feel every pair of eyes following her as she approached the piano bench. She sat down slowly, her fingers trembling above the keys. The room buzzed with whispers. Some guests looked amused. Others looked curious. A few seemed concerned for her. She closed her eyes for a moment. She tried to remember the feeling of playing when she was younger, when music felt like a safe place instead of something frightening. She tried to steady her breathing above all the noise and pressure around her. She could almost hear her younger self whispering from somewhere deep inside, "You can do this." Her fingers rested lightly on the keys. She opened her eyes. The entire room waited. And in that silent, fragile moment, just before she pressed the first note, she wondered if this one unexpected challenge might change more than just her night. When Lina sat at the piano, her hands trembled slightly over the keys. The soft hum of voices in the hall faded into the background as she tried to steady her breathing. But before she could play a single note, her mind drifted back to a time when music had been more than a memory. She didn't mean to think about it, but the sound of the piano keys under her fingers stirred something deep inside, something she had kept locked away for years. She pressed her fingertips lightly on the keys and whispered to herself, "It's just one song. You can do this." But her heart didn't fully believe it. She took another breath, then hesitated again, because this moment, the moment the millionaire had thrown at her like a casual dare, was bringing back pieces of her past she had tried so hard to leave behind. Back then, music had been the one thing that gave her comfort. When she was younger, she didn't have much, but she had an old upright piano in the small apartment she shared with her family. The keys were yellow with age, a few notes sounded uneven, and sometimes the pedals stuck, but she didn't mind. To her, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. She remembered waking up early on weekends, just to sit in front of it and play before the rest of the apartment grew noisy. She remembered the way sunlight streamed through the window and touched the keys. She remembered how her fingers seemed to know their way across the piano, even when she wasn't thinking. Those mornings felt safe. Music felt safe, but life didn't stay that simple. As Lina grew older, her family faced more and more difficulties. Bills piled up, and her parents struggled to keep things together. The piano became a luxury they could no longer afford to maintain. The lessons stopped. Repairs were ignored. And eventually, when the situation grew desperate, her parents had no choice but to sell the piano. She remembered the day it was taken away. She was a teenager then, standing at the doorway, watching two strangers lift the piano and carry it out. She didn't cry in front of them, but later that night, when everyone was asleep, she sat in the empty corner of the living room where the piano used to be and cried, silently into her knees. She didn't blame her parents. She knew they didn't want to let it go either. But losing that piano felt like losing a part of herself. After that, everything changed. She focused on work, school, and helping her family. Life became about survival, not dreams. She took small jobs, then bigger ones, and eventually ended up working at the hotel. She told herself it was better this way, that dreams were for people who didn't have responsibilities pressing on them every single day. Still, sometimes when she heard a piano playing, something inside her tightened. A memory, a hope, a reminder of what she once loved. And now, sitting at the grand piano in front of dozens of wealthy guests, all those feelings returned at once. She wasn't ready for it. She wasn't ready for the past to meet the present. So, suddenly, she lifted her hands from the keys for a moment, trying to collect herself. The room was still buzzing behind her, unaware of the storm happening inside her mind. She didn't know if she should push herself to play. She didn't know if she still could. She didn't know if she wanted to reopen a door she had shut for so long. But what she did know was that she wasn't here for herself. The millionaire had promised to double his donation. This wasn't about her talent or her nerves or her past. It was about helping children who needed support, children who might get opportunities she didn't. That thought gave her a fragile push of courage. Before she could start playing, though, a sudden memory flashed through her mind. Her last performance. The one she never talked about. It was years ago, at a small school recital. She had practiced for months. She had been excited. But during the performance, right in the middle of the piece, she froze. Her hands stopped. Her mind went blank. She stared at the keys as the audience sat in silence. She didn't finish the song. She ran off the stage before anyone could stop her. After that day, she never played in front of people again. Even thinking about it now made her stomach twist. What if it happened again? What if she sat here and froze just like before? What if the guests laughed? What if the millionaire regretted asking her? What if she disappointed everyone? She closed her eyes tightly for a moment. Her hands trembled, and she pulled them onto her lap. The piano felt huge, too big for her trembling nerves. Behind her, the voices grew louder. The millionaire said something to his friends that made them laugh. She could sense the impatience starting to form in the room. She opened her eyes. She couldn't stay frozen like this. She had to do something, anything, before she could lift her hands again. She heard someone whisper from the first row, "Do you think she can actually play?" Another person whispered back, "Probably not. She's just a waitress." The words stung more than they should have. Not because they were harsh, but because she had heard similar comments before in her life, comments that made her feel small. Comments that reminded her how easy it was for people to underestimate someone based on their job or appearance. But somehow, hearing those whispers gave her a strange sort of strength. Not because they encouraged her, but because they reminded her of all the times she had quietly fought through challenges without anyone noticing. She straightened her back slightly. She wasn't playing to impress them. She wasn't playing to be praised. She was playing because someone dared her. Yes, but also because she wanted to prove, if only to herself, that she wasn't the same scared girl who ran off stage all those years ago. And maybe, just maybe, there was still a part of her that missed the feeling of her fingers gliding. Across the keys, the charity cause mattered. But now, so did this moment. She lifted her hands slowly, touched the keys again, and let her fingers rest gently there. She was just about to press the first note when her mind drifted again, this time to her mother. Her mother used to sit beside the old, upright piano during Lena's practice sessions. She didn't play herself, but she would smile whenever Lena finished a piece. Her mother always said the same thing. Your music makes the house feel warm. Those words came back to her so vividly that her eyes watered. Her mother had always believed in her talent, even when Lena didn't believe in it herself. If her mother were here, she would tell her to breathe, to trust herself, to play from the heart instead of fear. Thinking of her mother steadied her. She wiped her eyes gently with the back of her hand so no one would notice. She breathed deeply once more, and then finally she pressed a key. A single soft note floated through the hall. It wasn't much, but it felt like opening a door she had kept shut for too long. But before she could continue playing, she felt a shadow approach behind her. Are you okay? A voice came from her manager, who had quietly walked up to check on her. He saw the way her shoulders were shaking. She nodded quickly, even though her voice trembled. Yes, I'm fine. He placed a hand gently on the back of the piano, not touching her, just offering support from a distance. If you need a moment, take it, he whispered. His calm tone grounded her. She wasn't alone. She had permission. No one was forcing her to play for entertainment. She was doing this willingly. She nodded again. The manager stepped back, returning to the corner of the hall. Lena placed both hands on the keys again. She took a deep breath, letting the air fill her chest and loosen the tightness inside her. And then, slowly, her mind began drifting backward again, this time to a memory more comforting than painful, a memory of her father showing her how to read the first few notes on sheet music. He wasn't a musician, but he had tried. He had sat beside her on the old piano bench, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, and told her that learning something difficult was like learning how to swim. You don't jump into the deep water right away, he had said. You start with small steps. Little by little, your body remembers what to do. Maybe that was what she needed to do. Now start with small steps. She pressed a second key. The sound spread softly across the hall. Conversations quieted. People began turning their heads toward the piano again. Even the millionaire leaned forward slightly, sensing that something was about to happen. But Lena didn't rush. She pressed another note, then another. She let herself feel the keys again, the texture of them, the weight of them. Her fingers trembled less now, not because she wasn't nervous, but because the piano felt familiar in a way nothing else did. She wasn't playing a full song yet, just single notes, testing the waters. And in those few seconds, something inside her began to unlock. More memories returned, memories of her practicing for hours, of small competitions at school, of the way teachers used to praise her gentle touch on the piano, memories of how music once made her feel alive. She let the memories wrap around her like a warm blanket, and just as she prepared to move from scattered notes into a melody, a sudden thought flashed through her mind. What if she failed again? What if she froze in the middle? What if this moment turned into another memory she wished she could forget? Her hands faltered, stopping again. She closed her eyes. She reminded herself that she wasn't a scared teenager anymore. She was older now, stronger than she realized. She had survived things more difficult than a room full of strangers expecting her to play. She whispered under her breath, "It's okay, just breathe." And finally, gently, she began to play the first few lines of the simple tune one she had learned as a child, one she never forgot even after all these years. The melody was soft hesitant at first. But recognizable. The whispers in the room ceased, and her fingers moved slowly but steadily. The past she had run away from was now guiding her in the present. She wasn't playing for applause. She wasn't playing for attention. She was playing for the child she used to be, for the family that once believed in her, for the feeling she thought she had lost, and for the chance to prove to herself that she still had a voice inside her, one that sounded like music. The first few notes that floated from the piano were soft, almost fragile, like a quiet whisper in a crowded room. Lena's hands still trembled, but the music guided her forward, pulling her gently into a space where she didn't feel watched, judged, or overwhelmed. It was a small melody she had played many times when she was young, back when life felt simpler and her dreams felt possible. At first, she played slowly, giving herself time to adjust. The notes were spaced out, almost as if she was feeling her way through a dark room. But as she continued, something unexpected happened. Her fingers began to remember the path on their own. The gaps between notes grew smaller. The melody started to flow more naturally. The fear that had frozen her earlier loosened its grip little by little. The room, which had been filled with soft chatter and clinking glasses only a minute ago, fell into a hush. People paused mid-conversation. Guests leaned slightly toward the stage, curious, surprised, maybe even confused. No one had expected much when the millionaire dared a waitress to play the piano. Some had expected her to play a few clumsy notes and laugh nervously. Others had assumed she would refuse altogether. But what they didn't expect, what they couldn't have imagined, was the tenderness in the sound that now filled the hall. The millionaire, who had been smiling in a playful, teasing way before, suddenly leaned back in his chair. His smile faded, not in a bad way, but in a way that showed he was seeing something he hadn't expected. His friends grew quiet too. One of them lifted a hand to his chin. Another sat forward, elbows on the table, eyes fixed on Lina. She didn't look at them. She didn't look at anyone. Her gaze stayed on the keys, her expression soft and focused. Every time she touched a key, she felt a little bit of her confidence returning. Like pieces of herself she thought she had lost were slowly finding their way back. But she didn't rush. She let the music breathe. As the melody flowed, memories came gently, but not in a painful way this time. She remembered small moments, her father clapping after she finished a practice piece, her mother humming while she played, the way the old upright piano had always creaked slightly when she sat on the bench. These memories didn't hurt now. They gave her warmth. She moved into the next part of the melody, slightly more complex, slightly faster. Her fingers glided across the keys more smoothly. Her shoulders relaxed. Her breathing steadied. She was no longer the quiet waitress everyone had overlooked when she entered the room. For a brief moment, she felt like the girl who once dreamed of playing on a real stage with a real piano. But the moment still felt surreal. The grand piano beneath her felt too perfect, too polished, too elegant compared to the old piano she grew up with. The hall felt too large, too bright, too filled with important people and expensive suits. And yet, despite all that, the music poured out of her naturally. She wasn't thinking about technique or perfection. She wasn't thinking about the millionaire who had dared her or the guests watching her. She wasn't thinking about the fear that had wrapped around her heart moments before. She was simply playing. And sometimes, simple things are the most powerful. A soft gasp rose from a table on the right side of the hall. It was small but unmistakable. Someone had been caught completely off guard by the beauty of the melody. Then another guest whispered something to their partner. Then another leaned closer to listen more fully. Slowly, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't just quiet, it was expectant, captivated. Even the staff who were walking around with trays paused for a moment to listen. One of the servers, who had been carrying a stack of plates, stopped behind a column, his eyes widening slightly as he looked at her. A bartender wiping glasses froze mid-motion. The hotel manager, standing near the back of the hall, exhaled as if relieved and amazed at the same time. No one had imagined that this quiet young woman, who spent most nights blending silently into the background, could create something so gentle, yet so powerful. But as Lena played, she didn't notice the way the room was reacting. She was lost in the memory of her own music, letting old feelings resurface in a way that didn't overwhelm her this time. She moved into the middle part of the melody. Her fingers hesitated only for a fraction of a second before she found the rhythm again. This was the part of the piece that had always been her favorite. It grew warmer, deeper, more emotional without being heavy. It felt like speaking without words, expressing things she never said out loud, and little by little. The room leaned into that feeling with her. The millionaire blinked several times, watching her fingers move. The playful tone in his expression disappeared entirely. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't amused. He wasn't waiting to make another joke. He was simply watching and listening and realizing that he had made a dare that uncovered something extraordinary. He whispered to one of his friends, "I didn't expect this." His friend nodded slowly. No one did. In the back of the hall, two event organizers whispered to each other as well. "She's incredible," one said. "I thought she was nervous," the other replied. "But look at her now." Their voices were soft. They didn't want to break the moment. They didn't want to disturb the delicate spell the music had cast over the room. Lena shifted into the next part, a section that dipped into a slightly sad tone. The melody's gentle rise and fall seemed to tell a story. A story of someone who had loved something deeply, lost it for a time, and now found it again in an unexpected place. Some guests felt their throats tighten. Others pressed their lips together, holding emotions they didn't want to show at a formal event. Even the sound engineer near the stage, who was usually too busy adjusting levels to listen carefully, lowered one of the controls and let the piano be heard clearly without interference. The room, filled earlier with laughter, chatter, and polite conversation, now breathed as one. Every note Lina played seemed to float through the air, reach each person differently, and sit gently on their hearts. It didn't matter whether they were rich or ordinary. It didn't matter whether they understood music or not. The feelings behind the notes were clear enough for everyone to understand. She played for another minute, then another. The melody grew more confident, more fluid. Her hands moved more boldly now, the hesitations nearly gone. It was as if each note she played gave back a piece of confidence she had lost over the years. Then something happened that would stay in the memory of everyone who witnessed it. The millionaire, who had originally made the dare as a casual challenge, slowly leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes fixed on Lina with complete focus. And then he did something no one expected from a man known for being loud and bold. He went silent, completely silent, not a word, not a movement. His expression changed from amused curiosity to something deeper, something like respect, or maybe even humility. Lina reached the final part of the melody. The highest notes in the sequence shimmered in the air like drops of water falling into stillness. Her hands moved quickly, yet gracefully, dancing lightly across the keys. She felt something changing inside her. It wasn't huge. It wasn't loud. But it was important. It felt like forgiveness for herself, for the years she had stopped believing in her talent, for the fear she had carried for so long. It wasn't perfect forgiveness, but it was a start. She let the last phrase of the tune stretch out gently. Each note drifted into the hall like a soft breeze. She slowed her touch, softened her fingers, and brought the melody to a gentle close. The final note hovered in the air for a breath, and faded with elegance. The silence that followed was not awkward or confused. It was stunned. Guests sat frozen. For a second or two, as if unsure whether the moment was real or imagined. The millionaire's mouth was slightly open. His friends blinked several times as though waking from a dream. Then, finally, the silence broke. A gasp came from somewhere near the center of the room. And then another dot, and then the applause began. Not polite applause. Not forced applause. Not the kind of applause people give out of obligation at a fancy event. It was real applause. Strong, loud, heartfelt applause that filled the room instantly and rose upward like a wave. People clapped with genuine surprise, with admiration, with emotion. They didn't expect to feel tonight. Some even stood. A few wiped their eyes discreetly. Even staff members clapped softly from the sides. Their faces glowing with pride. Lina didn't turn around right away. She stayed seated for a moment, hands resting on her lap, overwhelmed by the sound and unsure how to react. Her heart raced, not with fear now, but with something that felt warm and full. When she finally looked over her shoulder, the sight stunned her. People were applauding enthusiastically, sincerely, as if she had given them something valuable and precious. Her manager, standing at the back, nodded at her with a gentle, proud smile she had never seen from him before. Millionaire was still clapping, but his expression was different now. He wasn't amused. He wasn't teasing. He looked almost humbled, like he had just discovered something that made him rethink the way he saw people. Lina didn't know what to do. She stood slowly, giving a small, hesitant bow. Her cheeks warmed as she realized that everyone, even those who had doubted her, were applauding like she truly belonged on that stage. And for the first time in years, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. She felt seen. She felt heard. She felt alive. The moment the first note faded, a deep silence covered the entire hall, as if every sound in the world had been gently pressed away. For a second, no one even moved. It was almost strange how the room, which had been loud and full of chatter just minutes earlier, suddenly felt like a place where time had stopped. The young waitress slowly lifted her hands from the piano keys, still unsure if she had done the right thing. She didn't dare turn around yet. She wasn't ready to see the reaction of all those people she had been serving water to only an hour ago. She took in a slow breath. Her fingers were trembling, not because she regretted playing, but because it had been so long since she had allowed herself to feel music the way she just did. When she finally turned her head to see the crowd, she saw something she never expected. The millionaire who had dared her to play, the one who thought it would be a fun, harmless moment, was now standing completely still, staring at her with wide eyes. His confident smile had disappeared. Instead, his face looked thoughtful, almost curious in a different way. The guests closest to the piano were frozen too, their eyes following her every move. Even the servers who had been passing through the aisles stopped where they were. A young man holding a tray of drinks had paused his step without even realizing it, though one of the glasses trembled dangerously close to falling. It was as if everyone had been pulled into the same quiet feeling, unsure of what to do next. And then, without warning, a soft gasp came from a woman near the front row. It snapped the room back to life, and the quiet quickly turned into something else. People began whispering to one another, but their voices carried amazement, not judgment. One person clapped gently, then another, and within seconds, the entire room erupted into loud applause. Some stood up, others tapped the tables, and a few even whistled. Unable to hold back their excitement, the waitress didn't know what to do. She had never been in a moment like this. She stood up awkwardly, brushing her apron down as if that would make her fit in better. Her cheeks were burning, and she kept lowering her head, embarrassed by the attention. She wasn't used to people looking at her like this, with admiration instead of impatience. The millionaire was the first to step forward. He walked toward her with a slow, almost careful pace, as though he wanted to make sure he didn't scare her off. When he reached her, he didn't speak right away. He simply looked at her for a long second, studying her with a mixture of respect and apology. Finally, he let out a quiet breath. "I didn't know," he said softly, loud enough for her to hear, but quiet enough that no one else could. "I had no idea you could play like that." She didn't know how to answer, so she just gave a small, shy smile. It wasn't the first time someone had been surprised by her ability, but it was the first time it happened in front of so many people. "I thought you were joking," he added, shaking his head slightly. "I didn't expect this." "It's okay," she replied in a gentle voice. "I didn't expect to play tonight either." The applause went on, rolling through the hall like waves. A few guests approached with wide smiles, complimenting her while she stood there, unsure how to respond. One older man wiped the corner of his eye and said he hadn't heard someone play with such emotion in years. A woman in a floral dress told the waitress that her performance made the whole evening feel magical. Another man insisted that someone should give her a chance to play at real events, not just work at them. The manager of the restaurant appeared next, walking quickly toward the piano. For a moment, panic shot through her chest. She thought she was about to be scolded. Maybe she had made the wrong decision. Maybe she should have stayed in her place and ignored the dare completely. But the manager's expression shocked her. Instead of frustration, his face showed pride, real pride, the kind she had never seen from him before. When he reached her, he gave a thoughtful nod. "You didn't tell me you could do that," he said, resting one hand on the piano. She lowered her gaze. "It's not something I talk about much." "Well," he said, glancing at the crowd, "maybe you should." The millionaire joined the conversation with a gentle laugh. "She definitely should," he said. "I think she just changed the whole mood of the evening. I owe you something big." She shook her head quickly. "You don't owe me anything." "No," he insisted. "I promised I would double my donation if you played. And after hearing that, I think I should give even more." The manager raised his eyebrows in surprise, while the millionaire turned toward the stage where the event host stood. With a proud voice, he announced his new donation amount. The host nearly dropped his microphone. The number was far bigger than the original pledge, and the guests cheered loudly once again, impressed not just by the performance, but by the positive energy that now filled the hall. As the applause settled, a woman in a black suit approached the waitress. She introduced herself as an event coordinator who handled music programs for several hotels and small concert halls. She reached out her hand politely. "That was beautiful," she said. "I'd love to talk to you about performing at some of our events, not as a server, as a pianist." The waitress felt her heart skip a beat. The offer sounded unreal, like something from a dream she had let go of long ago. She didn't know whether to accept immediately or wait until she understood more, but the woman seemed sincere and patient. She handed her a card gently, encouraging her to reach out whenever she felt ready. The millionaire stayed near her the whole time, watching each person approach with admiration. He seemed proud of her in a way that didn't feel forced or dramatic. It felt genuine, like he had discovered something meaningful tonight too. "You know," he said after a moment, "you didn't just surprise us. You reminded everyone here what real talent looks like." She laughed nervously. "I'm not sure about that." "Well, I am," he replied, "and I think a lot of people in this room agree." She looked around and saw the guests still talking excitedly about her performance. A few were watching her from their tables with warm smiles. Some even lifted their glasses toward her, giving a small nod as a gesture of respect. She felt her eyes sting with emotion, but she blinked it back, not wanting to cry in front of everyone. Once the crowd dispersed a little, she sat at the side of the stage to steady herself. Her hands were still shaking, but now it was from the overwhelming support she had just experienced. A fellow server came over and quietly asked if she needed water. The simple gesture made her smile. "I'm okay," she said softly. "I just didn't think it would turn out like this." The server laughed. "None of us did. I've been working in this place for 2 years, and I've never seen the guests this quiet before. You did something special." Hearing that made her heart feel fuller than it had in years. She had played piano many times in her childhood, but she never expected her music to touch people like this again. Life had gotten too busy, too heavy, too full of responsibilities. She had pushed her passion so far away that she forgot what it felt like to express herself through sound. Now, standing in the middle of a room where dozens of people had just applauded her, she felt something awaken inside her, something warm and familiar, like an old friend returning. The millionaire returned once again and stood beside her. "I know this might feel overwhelming," he said gently, "but don't let this moment pass. You have something rare, something people need to hear." She looked at him, trying to understand why someone of his status would care so much. "Why? Are you being so kind?" she asked quietly. He smiled. "Because I've spent years listening to music from performers who had everything handed to them. What you did today came from the heart, and it moved everyone here, including me. That's not something money can buy." His words felt soft and honest. She appreciated them more than she could express. The evening continued with dinner and speeches. But from that moment on, everything felt different. People kept glancing at her with admiration. A few guests asked if she would play again later, though she politely declined, still processing everything that happened. When the event finally ended, the millionaire approached her one last time as she cleaned up near the stage. "Take your time with the decision," he said, referring to the potential opportunities she had been offered. "But don't be afraid to choose something for yourself." She nodded slowly, grateful for his advice. As she walked out of the hall. Later that night, she paused at the door and looked back at the piano. The soft light from the chandeliers made the instrument glow in a gentle golden shade. It almost felt like the piano was calling her again, reminding her that she still had a place in the world of music. She smiled to herself, touched the strap of her apron lightly, and whispered, "Maybe it's time." And for the first time in a long while, she stepped out into the night feeling hope instead of uncertainty. The next morning, the young waitress woke up earlier than usual. Her alarm hadn't even rung yet, but her mind refused to rest. She stared at the ceiling of her small room, still trying to understand if everything that happened last night was real. For a moment, she wondered if it had been a dream. The applause, the millionaire's reaction, the guests standing to cheer, the event coordinator offering opportunities. It all felt too big, too unexpected, like something that didn't belong in her simple life. The room around her was silent. Only the soft hum of the morning traffic outside drifted through the thin walls. She turned her head and looked at the small electric piano sitting near her window. It was old and missing 2 keys, but it was the only thing she had kept from her childhood. She used to play it every night until life pulled her in other directions. Now, seeing it again made her heart feel warm. The memory of last night rose again in her mind. The feel of the grand piano beneath her fingers, the soft shine under the chandeliers, the way the room grew quiet as her music filled the air. She remembered the expressions on the guests' faces, the surprise, the warmth. She remembered the millionaire standing in front of her afterward, looking at her not as a server, but as someone with real talent. She sat up slowly and ran her hand through her hair. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew things had already changed. Even if nothing else came from the night, she had rediscovered a part of herself she thought she had lost forever. After a long moment, she got ready for work. She wore the same black uniform she always wore, tied her apron neatly, and headed out. The walk to the hotel felt different today. It wasn't shorter or easier, but something inside her felt lighter. She took a deep breath of the morning air and let it fill her with a strange, gentle confidence. When she reached the hotel, she noticed something unusual. A few of the staff she usually worked with were whispering and smiling at her the moment she walked in. One of the servers, a friend she often shared breaks with, hurried over immediately. "There you are," the server said, practically glowing with excitement. "Do you know what happened? People are still talking about you." "Talking about me?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, about your performance last night. I swear, I've never seen the guests react like that to anything. They're asking who you are, if you're trained, if you can play at other events. The managers are impressed too. You're kind of a star right now." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "I'm not a star." "Well, to them you are," the server replied with a grin. "You showed them something real last night." Before she could respond, the restaurant manager approached with a clipboard in his hand. Normally, he looked busy or stressed, but today, his expression was warm. "Good morning," he said. "I'm glad you're here. Do you have a moment?" She nodded nervously and followed him to a quiet corner near the back office. Her stomach twisted slightly. She wasn't sure if she was about to be praised or warned. The manager lowered his clipboard and looked at her with a kind expression. "I wanted to say something about last night," he began. "What you did, it was extraordinary. I've worked here for a long time, and I've never seen guests respond that way to anything." She felt her face heat up. "Thank you," she said softly. "I also want you to know that you didn't break any rules. You had permission, and the outcome was positive for everyone." The event staff was thrilled. The guests were happy, and the hotel received more attention than usual. So please don't worry about your job. You're safe here. Relief washed over her like a wave. She hadn't realized how tightly she had been holding that fear. "There's more," the manager continued. "The woman who gave you her card last night? She spoke to the event coordinator this morning and asked for your contact information. She wants to talk with you again. Something about offering you a small performance slot at a charity brunch next month." Her breath caught. "A performance? Me?" "Yes," and she sounded serious. "If you want, I can help arrange a meeting. It could be a good opportunity." She nodded slowly. I'd like that." "Good," the manager said, smiling. "Take your time and think about it, but don't be afraid to take a chance. You deserve this." As the manager walked away, she stood still for a moment, letting the words sink in. A performance, a real one. The idea frightened her, but at the same time, it made her heart race with excitement. She didn't know if she was good enough for something like that, but last night had shown her that maybe, just maybe, she was. The rest of the day went by in a blur. Guests who had been at the event smiled at her when she passed their tables. A few even stopped her just to say how moved they were by her playing. One woman, dressed in a soft cream-colored jacket, told her, "You made everyone forget themselves." For a moment, that's rare, you know. Each compliment felt like a soft push, nudging her toward a future she had been afraid to imagine. Later in the afternoon, while she was polishing glasses behind the counter, the millionaire walked into the restaurant. His presence immediately caught the attention of the staff. He walked with a calm confidence, dressed in a simple suit that somehow looked more expensive than what most people wore. He spotted her almost instantly and approached with a gentle smile. "There you are," he said. "I was hoping to see you." She stood straighter, feeling shy again. "Good afternoon." "I wanted to check in," he said. "Last night was a lot." "How are you feeling today?" She hesitated. "A little overwhelmed, but grateful." "That's understandable," he said. "But I meant what I told you. You have something special. I hope you won't let it go again." She nodded quietly. He looked around the restaurant for a moment before speaking again. "I also want to tell you that I made my donation this morning. Actually, I increased it a bit more. It felt right after what you did." Her eyes widened. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he said gently. "Your music inspired me. And people like you remind people like me why giving matters." She didn't know what to say. Gratitude filled her eyes, but she managed a small smile. Before he left, he reached into his pocket and handed her a simple business card. "This is my direct number. Not for anything formal. I just want you to call me if you ever need advice or help with anything moving forward. I don't want you to feel alone in this." She took the card carefully, surprised by the kindness behind the gesture. He didn't treat her like a server. He treated her like someone who mattered. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded. "Take care of yourself," he replied before heading out the door. When he was gone, she stared at the card for a long time. It wasn't about who he was or the power he carried. It was the sincerity in his voice that touched her. She felt something shift deep inside, a moment where her life branched in a new direction. That evening, after her shift ended, she walked home slower than usual. The city lights twinkled around her, and she noticed small details she hadn't seen before. The gentle glow of a cafe sign, the laughter of people across the street, the soft breeze brushing against her shoulders. Everything felt different because she felt different. When she reached her room, she didn't change out of her uniform right away. Instead, she went straight to her little electric piano. She sat down and placed her hands on the keys, just feeling their cool surface. For a moment, she didn't play anything. She simply closed her eyes and breathed. Then, slowly, she began to play. The melody was soft at first, gentle and wandering, like a conversation with herself. She wasn't practicing. She wasn't performing. She was just letting her heart speak out as the music filled the room. She realized that last night hadn't happened by chance. It had awakened something she had buried, something she needed. Maybe she wasn't meant to leave music behind. Maybe it had always been waiting for her. She played until her fingers grew tired and her heart felt calm again. When she finally stopped, she sat quietly for a long moment, thinking about the opportunities ahead. She thought about the event coordinator's card in her apron pocket. She thought about the manager's encouraging words. She thought about the millionaire's sincere kindness. And she thought about the way the guests reacted, not out of politeness, but out of genuine emotion. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a future where music wasn't just a memory, but a path. She whispered to herself, "Maybe I can do this." And sitting there, in the soft light of her room, she believed it. The weeks that followed moved in a way she had never experienced before. Each day felt like a slow unfolding, gentle, hopeful, and filled with small surprises. It was almost strange how her usual routine still looked the same on the outside. She woke up, put on her uniform, tied her apron, and walked to the hotel. Yet something inside her had changed completely. There was a new energy in her steps, a quiet excitement that warmed her even on the days when the weather was cold. Word about her piano performance had spread farther than she expected. At the hotel, guests, who had not even been at the event, stopped her to ask if she was the girl who played the piano. Some of them asked questions about her music. Others simply smiled at her as if they already knew a secret about her. It felt strange, but in a good way, like she had been invisible for so long. And suddenly the world could finally see her. One afternoon, after a busy lunch shift, her manager approached her with a bright expression. "The coordinator wants to meet you tomorrow," he said. "She confirmed a spot for you at the charity brunch next month. But she wants to talk in person about what you'll play and how everything will work." The words made her heart flutter. She nodded, unable to hide the smile forming on her face. "That's great," she said softly. Later that evening, when she returned home, she practiced for hours. But it didn't feel like practice. It felt like reconnecting with something she had missed deeply. Every time she pressed a key, she felt her confidence grow a little more. Her fingers moved with more ease, more emotion. The tiredness in her hands didn't bother her. If anything, it made her feel alive, as though she was working towards something meaningful for the first time in years. The next day, she met the coordinator in a small cafe near the hotel. The woman greeted her warmly and smiled with the same kindness she had shown at the event. "I'm so happy you agreed to meet," the coordinator said. "Your performance the other night was unforgettable, and we'd love to have you play at the brunch. It's a smaller event than the one you played at, but the audience will really appreciate your style." The waitress nodded, listening carefully. "I'm not used to performing," she admitted, "but I'd like to try." "That's all we ask," the coordinator replied. "Just be yourself. That's what makes your playing special." They spent nearly an hour discussing the event. The coordinator explained the schedule, the space, and the type of audience that usually attended. She encouraged the young woman to choose music that felt personal to her, not necessarily classical pieces, but melodies that held meaning. When the meeting ended, the coordinator squeezed her hand gently. "You have a bright future," she said. "Don't doubt it." As she walked home, those words echoed in her mind. She didn't want to get ahead of herself, but a small voice inside whispered that maybe this was the beginning of something bigger than she imagined. The following weeks were filled with preparation. She practiced every night, sometimes losing track of time until she noticed the sky outside turning from dark to light. She experimented with different pieces, trying to decide which ones felt right for the event. She also took short breaks to remind herself to breathe, reminding herself that this was supposed to be a joyful experience, not a stressful one. During this time, the millionaire kept in touch. Not constantly, just enough to show he genuinely cared. Sometimes he sent a short message asking how her preparations were going. Other times he shared encouraging words. One evening, he stopped by the hotel and asked if he could speak with her for a moment. They stood near the entrance, away from the noise. "I don't want to interfere," he said, "but I want you to know that if you need anything, advice, support, or even a better piano to practice on, I'm here for you." His offer was kind, but she shook her head gently. "Thank you," she said, "but I want to try this on my own for now. I need to know that I can do it." He smiled in understanding. "That's exactly why I think you'll succeed." As the day of the event approached, she felt a mix of nerves and excitement. She bought a simple dress, nothing fancy, just something that made her feel comfortable and confident. She stared at it for several minutes after hanging it in her closet, imagining how it would feel to wear it while performing in front of people who actually came to listen. When the morning finally arrived, she woke before the sun. The air felt cool, and a soft light peeked through her curtains. She dressed carefully, tied her hair neatly, and took one last look at herself in the mirror. She didn't look different from any other day, but she felt different. She felt ready. The venue for the charity brunch was a bright, beautiful hall filled with soft colors, fresh flowers, and warm light streaming through tall windows. The moment she walked in, the coordinator rushed toward her with excitement. "You look wonderful," she said. "Come, let me show you the piano." They walked together to the front of the room, where a polished baby grand piano waited for her. It wasn't as large or grand as the one at the previous event, but it was perfect, warm and inviting, with a clean shine that reflected the morning sun. She sat down and tested a few notes. They rang crisp and clear, filling the space gently. She smiled, relieved. Guests began arriving soon after. They were well-dressed but relaxed, chatting with each other as they took their seats. Some recognized her from the video that had been shared around, and a few whispered excitedly. She pretended not to notice, focusing instead on keeping her breath steady. When the coordinator finally gave her a small nod from across the room, she placed her hands on the keys and let the world fall away. She started with a soft piece, something simple, something close to her heart. The room began to quiet instantly. Conversations faded, forks were set down, and heads turned toward her. The notes flowed gently, like a calm river moving across smooth stones. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music guide her, letting each note fall where it belonged. As she continued, her confidence grew. She transitioned into a more emotional melody, one she had written herself years ago. She had never played it for anyone before. It was filled with memories of childhood, of loss, of dreams she once let slip away. And now, sitting in front of a room full of strangers who had come to listen, she felt those memories transform. Instead of weighing her down, they lifted her up. By the time she finished, the room was completely silent. A silence so full and warm that it made her chest tighten. Then, slowly at first, the applause began. It grew louder, stronger, until nearly everyone was standing. Some clapped with wide smiles. Others looked emotional. One woman dabbed her eyes with a napkin. She stood up slowly, her hands trembling again, but this time they trembled from joy. She bowed her head slightly, overwhelmed. After the performance, guests approached her one by one. They spoke to her kindly, telling her how much they loved the music, asking if she had been playing for years, encouraging her not to stop. One man said, "Your music made me remember something beautiful from my childhood." A woman added, "You have a gift. Don't ever hide it again." The coordinator hugged her gently. "I knew you would touch their hearts," she said. "This is only the beginning for you." And she believed it. Later, as the event ended and the guests left slowly, she sat alone at the piano for a moment. The sunlight had shifted, creating little golden shapes on the floor. She touched the keys lightly, feeling grateful, hopeful, and proud. The millionaire approached quietly from behind. He had attended the brunch without telling her, not to make her nervous, but simply because he wanted to see what she would do. "You were incredible," he said softly. She turned and smiled. "Thank you." "No," he replied gently. "Thank you. You inspired every person in this room today, including me." She didn't know what to say, so she just smiled again. He stood beside her as she looked at the piano. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. She breathed deeply. "I'm thinking, maybe this is what I'm meant to do." He nodded. "I think you're right." She traced one of the keys with her finger, feeling its smooth surface. "I almost gave up on music," she said. "I thought that part of my life was over." "But it wasn't," he replied. "It was waiting for the right moment to return." She looked up at him, her eyes gentle and bright. "It feels like a new beginning." "It is," he said, "and I hope you follow it." As they left the venue together, she held her small music notebook against her chest. The world outside looked brighter, clearer. The breeze carried a soft calmness, and for once, she didn't feel unsure about tomorrow. She felt ready. her story didn't end that day. It simply opened into another chapter. A chapter she would walk into with courage, hope, and the music that had never left her heart. And as she stepped forward, she knew one thing for certain. Sometimes life changes in one unexpected moment, and sometimes those moments lead you exactly where you are meant to be all along.